Hi there from Chicago. Mike Hall here. This is Big Ten Today presented by Gatorade. Thrilled to have you with us in our Chicago studios. This is Olivia Karras. We're ready to talk gymnastics. And before we dive in, we were talking about the atmosphere of this upcoming week, and the words used to describe it surprised me. What is the atmosphere like at Nationals?
Well, a lot of people think it's stressful, but it's actually a celebration. It's the end of the season. It's very positive. All of the athletes are under one roof, same judges, same energy, and so you can feed off of the energy. Even if it's not your team's energy, there's energy, and so it's a constant feed off of what you're hearing, enjoy the moment, and everyone's there to see great gymnastics.
Thursday and Saturday in Fort Worth, Texas. That's where we're going to start off our show right now. It is indeed our big story, and we focus on the fact that there are 8 teams that are going to be there, 4 all-around competitors, 16 event specialists. We're going to start off looking at the teams that are competing for the Big Ten, UCLA and Michigan State. And the Spartans have only gotten this far one time previously, back in 1998. What has this year been like for the green and white?
You know, in the last couple of years, everyone thought it's Michigan State's year. It's Michigan State's year. This has been their year. They came out with a different energy. It almost felt like they had experienced being really good and people expecting them to get to this level. And then this year they said, oh, we don't expect it, we know it. Mm-hmm. And that's how they've competed all season. They said they had a little bit of a dip in the middle of the season. I talked to a couple of the athletes this week, and once they get to postseason, it was full armor, full speed ahead, and that's what I've seen from them. They've been fighting, and they deserve to be there.
What was the little dip they felt they experienced?
You know, sometimes we call it the mid-season slump.
Yeah.
And when you're competing every weekend, you're tired, and your body hurts, and you're exhausted. And so when you get to postseason, you're so energized. This is it. This is the final push. It's, you know, it's the last quarter of the game. And so I think for them, they were in that little bit of third quarter slump.
Gotcha.
And here they are now, ready to go, good energy, and I'm excited for them.
Well, and we all know what the program has been through, the scandal that rocked them a few years back. With all that in mind, and the fact that I mentioned the late 90s was the last time they got this far, what would a successful turn this week in Fort Worth do for that program?
You know, of course, being there is so exciting. First time since 1988. I mean, talk about breaking a drought in an amazing way. But I think this team is meant to be there. They didn't get there because another team messed up. Right. And they just happened to have a great day. They got there because they were in the top 10 all season, and they had a great day 2 days at regionals. And so for them, I don't think just getting there is the success. I think they can compete with these teams, with the reigning national champions in LSU, with UCLA. They're that caliber, and I wouldn't be shocked if they qualified to the 4 on the floor competition to vie for a national title.
And you were talking about how in 2021, they didn't end up doing Big Ten, right. and they kind of came out with a renewed energy in 2022, which is kind of the beginning of this upward trajectory for them, right?
Yeah, that's right. In 2021, they had injuries. They were plagued with COVID, and so they didn't compete at the Big Ten Championship. In 2022, they came out, and everyone went, who are these Spartans? I mean, they were just different. And you know, they wanted to make it to nationals numerous years before, but truly this year was the year where it all clicked in the right way.
The head coach is Mike Rowe. He's been there a while. What has he done best this year with this team?
You know, every time I talk to him, I ask him that exact question because I think to myself, what have you done? It should be studied. And he says, I trust the girls. I trust the athletes. And every time they compete, it's truly from them. He says when they start practices, they don't give corrections. The athletes go, yeah, we need to do one more set of that. We need to do another one. We need to do another round of vaults to stick better. They're the ones pushing. And you can't teach that. Right. That is full drive inside of you. And these Spartans have seen them at the lowest of lows. And then they've seen the climb. And they're at that point where they go, well, we can get better if we just do one more. And so every time he tells me that, he says we've recruited great athletes who have the drive for the green and white.
Yeah. You mentioned the fact that they're going up against programs who are quite used to being on this stage.
Right.
But these girls are not used to it in East Lansing. They're not those who've been there year after year. How much is inexperience at this particular event going to be a hurdle they have to find their way around?
I like to think of it as ignorance is bliss.
Okay.
Because when you compete in these large arenas, it's the same gymnastics. It's 4 events. You're not adding anything different. And so while the energy is national championship worthy, you have incredible crowds of people that travel with teams and as fans, it's still just a gymnastics meet. And so for me, I think for them going into this, not knowing what they're getting into is awesome, because it's just going to be soak it in, enjoy the energy, and they feed off of that, and it's going to be great for them.
It's a great story, what they've been able to do this year. We'll see what they can continue doing at Nationals. The other team is UCLA, and they've got a great history. We were, again, talking before on air. When we did those Welcome to the Big Ten shows this summer, I got a chance to talk with the UCLA Gymnastics head coach and see their facilities, and their wall is just littered with banners over the decades. Let's talk about this year's team first. They won the Big Ten title a couple weeks ago. How?
It was so much grit. I mean, they were behind for the first couple rotations. They ended on floor, which is truly their, shining star, is floor exercise for them. And they always say, Hollywood's in our backyard, so we have to put on a show, which I just love. But when it comes to this UCLA team, they really dialed in on minimizing deductions. And that means if you're going to take a step on a landing, make it as small as possible. And they were intentional about that, which meant that those tenths that used to be 1, 2, 3 tenths became 1.5. 1 1/4. And that's what projects you into that higher score percentile, because you're being more intentional about those deductions. And I saw that at Big Tens from them. They still gave things away. So to think that they had that score in that environment, they won, and they still had more to give, is remarkable.
Is that something that can be repeated at Nationals, that strategy?
I do think it can be. And what's interesting is they start on floor, which, as I mentioned, is their marquee event. And they did that at regionals both days. They started on floor in round 2 and round 3 as well. So for them, the most important thing is staying consistent with the energy. When they come out on floor like that, that's their big event. Keep that throughout the rest of the competition and make sure you're not losing energy, because floor can always reignite the fire. But if you give that all in rotation 1 and then come rotation 4, you're a little tired and less focused, that's where things can go awry. And so I think if they're focused the way they are on floor, they'll be good to go.
How do you describe Jordan Childs?
Oh, wow. I like to call her the CEO, the Chief Energy Officer, because she truly has so much energy that I've never seen someone with this type of energy, and her passion for gymnastics is very evident in the way that she treats her teammates, as well as the way she attacks any exercise, all 4 events. And what I've been the most impressed with her is she hasn't had a perfect season. People think Olympian, she must be perfect and get 10s all the time. She hasn't, but every week she's made a positive change that has made her better. And I think it's really impressive when you see someone who has a gold medal for Team USA continue to improve in their craft at the collegiate level and help her team get to this Elite 8 situation. So I think she's not done with that growth this season. I see more opportunity for her to be more dialed in, more intentional about those deductions, and being really focused on what she needs to do.
We talked about the Michigan State inexperience. That's the opposite with
Completely.
her. I mean, she's not going to be afraid of this stage at all.
No, I mean, she's been to the Olympics,
Right.
the World Championships, everything you could list, she's been to it. And so for her, I think it's going to be all about staying focused on herself and her team and not getting wrapped up in the energy and excitement, because she is an Energizer bunny and she could feed off of that. So staying focused is key.
Janelle McDonough, the head coach, second time the last 3 years she's had them at Nationals at UCLA. What is it about that program that they're able to be so good for so long?
They call it poly magic, and when you're in poly and UCLA is competing, there's just something magical about that team. And what Valerie Condos-Field did for that team for all those years as the head coach is nothing shy of remarkable. I mean, she built that from the ground up. And what Janelle inherited is a lot of history, but she's also rewriting how the team goes about things moving forward. They're always going to stay true to their Hollywood vibe and energy and LA flair, but they're continuing to be really technical. They've struggled in the past on balance beam in particular. Janelle brings in Lacey Dagan, former Oregon State gymnast, who's just been, the athletes can't say more positive things about her. She gets them. She's really focused on the mental side of it. And I think that's what they were missing in years past. And so this is a good coaching staff to coach this group of women, and we're seeing that so far.
What do they have to do in order to be victorious this week, the UCLA program?
UCLA on floor, bars, and beam are lights out. Vault is their Achilles heel, and if they can be intentional about those landings, and they can really dial in on not overexerting and using your adrenaline to your disadvantage, but dialing in on those landings, staying really tight, that could be the boost that could get them through to the Final Four on the floor competition, and obviously staying on the equipment. You can't afford to count a fall, but considering they've been great so far this year, vault is where they really need to dial in.
So that means on Thursday, we've got Michigan State and UCLA trying to win a national champion. The last Big Ten national champion was?
Michigan.
Michigan in 2021.
That's
we'll
right.
see starting Thursday. By the way, UCLA also won a national title in 2018, but
They
of course
did.
they weren't in the Big Ten at the time. If you did a word count based on that piece, the one that was said the most was either smile or smiling. What does that say about Maya Hooten?
She embodies joy. Every time you watch her compete, my heart just sinks because it's pure love for the game. It's love, it's joy, it's passion. And as head coach Jenny Hansen said in that segment, yes, the tumbling's fabulous, but there's a presence she brings that is unmatched. You can't teach that. And Maya Hooten has meant so much to Minnesota, Big Ten, NCAA, so I'm thrilled that she gets to conclude her career at the national championship.
And her story's not done yet, but already, what legacy is she leaving behind in Minneapolis?
I mean, you heard it. First 10 on floor in program history, first time becoming an All-American on floor that many times, back-to-back floor champion. I mean, it's just, her resume is a scroll. You have so much, there's not even enough room on a piece of paper. But I think what she truly means to this program is she's a kid from Minnesota who always wanted to be a Gopher, and she made it happen, and she got there. And that, to me, is the legacy that I know she'll leave.
Most important thing for her to do this week?
Not overthink. I mean, I know at the Big Ten championship, she didn't have the floor routine she wanted. She was a little upset after the meet. And I said to her, you have won everything in sight. You've done it. This is your chance to just go out there and enjoy. And I think this weekend for her, get out of her head and just look at the lights, experience everyone being there to watch her. She's rotating with the Missouri Tigers, who match her energy really well. It's a natural fit. So just go out there and have fun. It's her last time getting to be the Maya Hooten as a Minnesota gymnast.
Again, she's one of 3 individuals who are competing, and a very different situation than for Sophia Diaz at Michigan, because Hooten's in her 5th year at Minnesota. This is the first year. What is the freshman doing here at National? You're not supposed to do that as a freshman.
Well, Sophia Diaz said, I am going to do this. She stuck her vault at regionals, 995, career high for her, so highest score she's ever received in her college career to date, and qualifies. And you know, what a confidence boost for a rookie coming into this big environment. She's going to do 1 vault, so it seems crazy that she's going all the way to Texas for a vault, but that's the caliber that you want to reach at those moments that will qualify you, and she did that. So there's a lot to be proud of.
When we watch her in the vault, what should we be looking for?
Really aggressive, high energy, and just to find that landing. It's all about landings. You'll hear, if you watch the competition this weekend, everyone will say landings, landing, landings, and that's what it comes down to. So I hope she enjoys it. I hope she doesn't stress herself out too much and just have fun and take it all in.
Well, what you said earlier about Michigan State being inexperienced applies here too. Hopefully, for her sake, the ignorance is bliss is on her side.
Absolutely.
Right. All right, she's the second one. The third is Mary McDonough of Washington. Little bit more seasoned. She's a sophomore. How do you describe how she got here? Because her story is a little different when you consider what the team wasn't able to do in the postseason.
That's right. Washington didn't qualify as a team to the regional championship. So Mary competed at regionals as an individual and went lights out. Absolutely fantastic competition, so exciting for her, and then qualifies as the individual all-arounder from that region. So not only did she not have a team there, she won't have a team here, but she is the only individual that did that. So what an accomplishment for her, an accomplishment for the program, and I mean, just excited to see her soak that in. Another athlete who's never been to the national championship, and here she is, she gets to do it.
If you're in that situation where you're the only representative from your team, is it, like, I would think part of that feels like isolated, that you're looking around and you see somebody's got an entire team with them and you're like, oh, it's just me here. Am I reading that falsely?
No, you're correct. It can be isolating, but what gymnastics is so amazing with is the teams adopt the individuals. And in the past, you've seen teams give, little care baskets and gift baskets saying, welcome to our team. They learn parts of the routine so that they can give the team energy to the individual, because at some point, someone on every team is probably gone as an individual, and it's not as fun as being there with your team. So the least you can do as a team who gets to go is give that same care that you received to the individual. And that's one of my favorite parts of nationals is when everyone adopts their individuals and they just become a part of the team there. It's the camaraderie that's exciting.
Yeah. Walk me through what the week is going to be like for these people. Again, Thursday is when the competition starts.
Right.
But what happens Wednesday? What happens Tuesday? What's going on today right now?
So everyone's finishing up practices today, getting in their last practice, wrapping things up, fly tomorrow to Fort Worth, Dallas-Fort Worth, and banquet tomorrow. Wednesday is the practice day, so everyone gets to do their routines on the actual equipment they'll compete on.
Right, kind of learning the arena or feeling the vibe of the place.
Exactly. And then Thursday, as you said, semifinal 1, semifinal 2. We'll have 2 athletes in the first semifinal, and then Michigan State, UCLA, and I believe Sophia Diaz in the evening. And then if those teams have great days, they could qualify to the national championship on Saturday.
And Friday is mostly rest for those who've moved on, or is there...
Rest, exploration of Fort Worth, maybe go to the stockyards, check it out. But yes, rest before a big day on Saturday.
Awesome. And we'll have a national champion crowned on Saturday. Olivia Cares, great stuff. Thanks so much for being here. Michigan football last year was coming off a national championship, but lost a ton of players to the pros. Brought in a brand new full-time head coach, ended their season with a bang, beating Ohio State on the road, then beating Alabama in a bowl game. That momentum carried over into spring ball. Well, they'll have coming up this Saturday in Ann Arbor. And with that in mind, it is time for our big interview. It is always a big interview when Sheronne Moore is good enough to join us, the head coach of the Maize and Blue. Sheronne, at this point in the spring, what has you most excited about this team?
Just the team feel. I feel like we got a really close team of young men that are all abiding by our, motto, team over me. Everybody's done everything right. Everybody's attacked the process. So it's been fun, man, having, great coordinators, great coaches, and even better players. They just made it a fun environment. It's great to be out on a football field and not sitting in an office and really going to battle. So it's been an awesome spring so far.
Let me give you a chance to shine a spotlight on one or two people. Give me a couple players who've stood out to you thus far.
I mean, the first one I would say is Derek Moore, our edge rusher, number 8. He's been unbelievable. Done a really good job of putting pressure on the quarterbacks and stopping the run. Him and TJ Guy, that edge duo. Those guys have been awesome, and they're not far behind with Cam Brandt and Dom Nichols. So I'm really excited about our D-line as a whole. Trey Williams, a transfer from Clemson, has been awesome. Rayshon Benny's been great. And, on the offensive side of the ball, both quarterbacks, man, have been really good. Jaden Davis, Bryce Underwood, Mikey Keene's been working through something, and he's actually throwing here this week, so feel pretty good about him. So those guys have been taking the bulk of the reps, and they've been great, and feel like we got an improved receiver core. O-line's building and doing a great job. So it's hard to shine it on one guy or two guys when you feel like you got a really good group of players as a team.
Yeah, it's a good position to be in. You brought up the wide receiver room. How deep is the wide receiver position for you guys this year?
It feels like a little, much deeper than years of the past. I feel like we've had really, good 1, 2, or 3 punch, and feels like there's 4 or 5 or 6 guys can go make a play. The impact that our new transfer from Indiana, Donovan McCulley, has had on a team has been great, has been huge. He's been awesome. Feels like he's really taken the reins and as a leader in that room. But guys like Samaj Morgan, Fred Moore, Channing Goodwin, all those guys have really stepped up. Marion Stewart, and then the young guys like Andrew Marsh and Jamar Browder has really showed. So it's going to be a great group to watch, an exciting group to watch.
Well, let's talk about Chip Lindsey, the new offensive coordinator. What feels similar or different in how the offense is going to run this season?
Yeah, I can't give you too much, but as far as similar, we're always going to have the style, the mentality to run the football and be physical in the run game and in the passing game, but doing things a little bit different at times. Whether it be formationally, movement-wise, past concepts that we're doing a little bit different. And he's brought a cool little twist to what we've done here before to make it even better. And I always say that growth and comfort don't coexist. So you got to be uncomfortable sometimes, and sometimes things can be, look a little different, to me in my eyes and the way we've done things. So, but I'm excited to see how it looks in the future.
Well, I get a feeling you might not want to answer this, but do you think in terms of passing, the types of passing plays will be different, or the frequency in which Michigan is passing will be different?
I think we'll see. I've done a lot of studies and look at what we've done in the past, and there's this saying that we don't throw the ball, which is completely untrue. It's just, I mean, everybody looks at one game and said we didn't throw it. I was like, yeah, I understand. Penn State, we didn't throw the ball very much. But besides that, we were pretty balanced. I mean, so I feel like we've had a balanced attack. We're going to try to keep doing that. And, just the concepts and the way we attack defenses and the levels we attack them will be a little different.
Samaj Morgan recently called Chip Lindsey, quote, a geek at football. You agree?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. He's done an outstanding job. And the players love him. I think it's part of it is his Southern accent they love. They just love messing with it. But he's very knowledgeable in the game, understands it, can dissect it very well, and brings such a different, background of football. Being a high school coach and being a spread coach for so long, and being a part of a program at Troy and at Auburn, and that's where he really learned to run the football and do different things. And then going to North Carolina, as an office coordinator at Arizona State, he's been a head coach. So he's got so many experiences that also has helped me as well to grow a little bit more in my role.
It's funny you brought up the accent, because that does seem to keep coming up. What is his accent like that it's so interesting to the players?
He's from Alabama. He's got that Southern twang, and but he's awesome. He's infectious to the players. He's infectious to the staff. We love him.
What have you learned in the last few months when it comes to Bryce Underwood? You and I talked on signing day about him, but in the last few months, what have you learned about him?
That he really is addicted to football, that he loves it. He loves the preparation. He loves the grind. To the point sometimes you got to tell him, dude, like, you need to get some sleep. Like, it's not healthy. And but he loves it, man. He just wants to be the best, and he works at it, and he's doing a really good job for us.
How often are you texting Tom Brady?
It's funny. I actually just talked to him on Saturday about some stuff. So I try not to bother him too much. He's got a lot going on. So, but we text every so often.
Who's he text more, you or Bryce Underwood?
I would probably say Bryce, but I'm not sure about that.
When you talk with Tom, is it straight up like Michigan love, or are you guys talking about, White Lotus or something totally unrelated to football?
I mean, if you talk football with Tom, he answers right back. If you talk anything else, that's not really his ball game. Like, you start talking plays that, he ran with the Patriots or with the Bucks, like, he's going to give you a great answer. He's going to talk to you for a while, but if it's anything else, he's probably, figured out something else to do. So I don't blame him, though. So I'd probably do the same thing.
I mentioned at the top, last year you had a bunch of guys going off to the pros. You're going to have the same situation this year. As we get closer to the NFL draft, what is it like for you? Are people still reaching out from the NFL and asking your thoughts on guys, or is that time already come and gone?
No, I think it goes up to the last hour of the draft and even when they're drafting guys. So it's a continual process for the guys, and I'm just going to do everything I can to help them, to put them in the best position to be successful. But yeah, we're getting calls every day, and we'll keep answering them and doing anything possible for our players to be in a great place.
There's so much talk right now, Sherrone, about the changing landscape of not just college sports in general, but specifically college football as well. There's a lot of talk about what spring football should be going forward. What do you think it will be in a few years?
You know what? It's kind of unpredictable. I'd really like to think it's, still getting practices in, you're still getting work in, but I mean, it feels like it's going to the NFL model of somewhat OTAs, and that at some point in time, whenever that is, that we're all going to go to this non-padded, walk-through / practice phase. But, there's nothing like getting the pads on and playing the game and playing fast and putting the ball down and playing football. Because, you look at every other sport, basketball, volleyball, all these other sports, they play year-round. So football is the only sport, and I know it's physical, but they play year-round, and that's why they get so good at it. That's why the guys in the NBA are so skillful. But so I think from a football standpoint, we either got to get to the NFL model and do it like them, because that's, they've got a pretty good process of how the professionals handle it, or we're going to continue to have practices.
All right. Sherrone Moore, head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. Always great catching up with you, man. Thanks.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Go Blue.
Spring game not slated until next weekend in Eugene, but the defending conference champs are well underway with spring practices. trying to take the next step after last season winning the Big Ten in their first year in the league and making the playoff, only to lose to the eventual national champions. More on the Oregon Ducks. We bring in James Crepea, football reporter. So the first practice was this past weekend in spring. But let me kind of go big picture with them. Last year, the only undefeated team entering playoff, and the main storyline was, my goodness, is this a hard path for the top team in the country? Sure enough, they lose their first game in that playoff. Dan Lanning very appropriately, I felt like, brushed it off and said, that's not a big deal. We got to win the games in front of us. How do locals feel about that now that a few months have passed?
Yeah, I think the conversation about their draw and the way that the playoffs was set up, obviously, is the topic of offseason conversation. You still hear from the commissioners in the college football playoff that that's going to be something that's going to be addressed potentially as soon as this upcoming season. But in terms of going back in history, obviously, it's over. It's done. There's no undoing it. And it was handled appropriately, I think, by everybody at the time. And that wasn't the only matchup that was extreme. Yes, it was the one that drew the most attention because it was two Big Ten teams. It was the number one seeded team and the undefeated team. But it wasn't the only one that people felt that way about necessarily. But in the end, of course, it's the one that draws attention. And obviously, yes, there's still conversation to be had. But how do the fans feel about it at this point? I think for a large part of this fan base, far be it for me to speak on behalf of Oregon fans, but I do think a significant part of this fan base, like the program, honestly, has just moved forward to the next season. It's done. It's over. It's 3+ months ago. That was last year. But that was a very different team than this team that's preparing here this spring and for next season.
Speaking of different on this team, where are we on the quarterback position for this upcoming season?
Yeah, it's being called a competition between Dante Moore and Austin Novosad. And look, they're both Elite 11 finalists from a couple of years ago, both blue chip recruits. Obviously, Moore was a starter at UCLA, as we all know, a couple of years ago. They both were backups last year, both played very seldomly last year. So you really can't go off of anything other than what they did in practice and were behind Dillon Gabriel. I say they're calling it a competition because, look, you hear this from every coach across the country, particularly in college, particularly with the transfer portal and everything going on out there. As if we don't need the reminder, even just this past week at Tennessee and what's going on. At the same time, we've heard it was a competition from Dan Lanning when it was Bo Nix and Ty Thompson. And Bo Nix was a first-round quarterback, and Ty Thompson is now at Tulane and has changed positions to tight end. We've heard about other competitions at other places. Bottom line, Dante Moore came here with Dillon Gabriel a year plus ago with an understanding that it was to be behind Gabriel for a year and then put himself in position to at least compete, if not be effectively the starter in 2025. That is certainly the expectation from anybody and everybody outside the program. Look, there's one reason why one of these quarterbacks has Heisman odds that you can bet on, and the other one doesn't right now. And that's not knocking Austin Novosad, who would probably start at a lot of programs. That's why it could still be considered a competition, and Lanning has credibility in the room saying it. But calling it what it is, if Novosad were to win this job without injury or something happening, it would be very surprising to a lot of people on the outside of the program. And that's not knocking Austin Novosad. It's saying these are two really talented players, but Moore is considered more talented and the better player coming in. And from every indication that we've had so far, that's the case. But these practices so far in the spring have been closed. So we'll see in the spring game what it looks like once there's people in the building and the rest of us can watch and see what's happening.
Maybe the most intriguing position group for me with the Ducks is the people catching the balls from whoever the quarterback is. What stands out to you about this wide receiver group?
Like a lot of spots on this roster, it's a lot of inexperienced and unproven players, but particularly at receiver. You could say that about almost every position, but either they reload on the offensive line where that's the case, where they lost some guys, or some spots on the D-line or the secondary, whatever the case is. But you're right, at receiver, yes, they have Evan Stewart back, and that's significant. And they have a lot of players back, quite frankly, from the scholarship chart from last year. They lose their top two guys in Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden. They return virtually everybody else. Yet those everybody else guys, not a lot of them are proven commodities. Not a lot of them had a lot of production last year because Johnson and Holden were the lead guys. And you had a tight end in Terrence Ferguson who had a lot of catches as well. So while on one hand, they're almost all former blue chip prospects, and DeCorian Moore being the lead guy of them all in terms of the star freshman, like we heard about Jeremiah Smith a year ago for Ohio State, that's DeCorian Moore and what Oregon fans hope and expect of this 5-star freshman this fall. But that said, we're still talking about spring, and we haven't just seen it yet in front of the masses just yet. Can he really start immediately and be effective for this receiving corps that does have an Evan Stewart, that has a Gary Bryant Jr. coming back off an injury last year where he wasn't that productive, obviously, but 2 years ago he was. But there's a lot of other younger guys. Like I say, now it's their time. Not this starting in this spring, but in this fall, there's going to be a lot of receivers on this team who you just haven't heard a lot of before and haven't seen a lot before. But they're going to be getting a lot of opportunities by default because, like I say, they were behind other guys who are no longer here.
On the defensive side of things, there was a big name pickup for Oregon. Dylan Thieneman, the safety from Purdue, who made such a splash right away as a freshman in West Lafayette. What are the expectations for him?
To be a starter and to be nearly as productive as he was at Purdue. And I say nearly because he was extremely productive at Purdue, and that was obviously a far less talented defense. I don't know if he'll have to have 100 tackles on the Oregon defense. Frankly, if a safety's having 100 tackles in this defense, something has probably gone a little bit wrong. He's come in, he's impressed with his work ethic. He's been absolutely celebrated by virtually everybody, coaches and players alike, for just the way that he goes about his business. And you can understand why. The literal first guy in, last guy out of the building kind of perspective. But in terms of what's expected of him, to keep being him and doing what he's doing so far, but in the fall, to be that highly productive guy in the back end of this defense that, for as good as it was last year, especially in the secondary against most teams, you mentioned at the top, Mike, look, if they're going to be going up against the likes of Ohio State or Penn State, potentially in a conference championship game, obviously in the regular season at Penn State in September, or if they're going to get back to the playoff and play the teams that are like them, that have that kind of firepower. If you're going up against a team who's got 2 or 3 future NFL receivers, you need a secondary that isn't just good against everybody else, but undersized. You need guys who can shut down 2 or 3 NFL receivers and a potential NFL quarterback. That's where this defense has been lacking for a couple of years. They could have really good players, but not necessarily great in the secondary. Thieneman's going to be one of those pieces that they hope can take this secondary to the next step, to where they can effectively shut down or better contain those high-octane offenses like we saw from Ohio State last year and like we've seen from other teams in the past.
I want to ask you one more kind of big picture question about Oregon. We're not quite done, but approaching the end of the first school year with Oregon as a member of the Big Ten. And a couple times last year when I was in Eugene, I felt like it was a pretty easy transition. The campus feels like a Big Ten campus. The vibe felt like the travel wasn't a concern. It was more like this felt like a decent cultural fit. They liked being there. Almost every program I got that vibe. But I'm curious from your point of view, what this first year being in the new conference has been like culturally, big picture wise for Oregon.
Well, I think it's, to your point, I think it's been a natural fit. I thought it was a natural fit before the move came to be. I thought it was an eventuality for Oregon, for Washington, and for the LA schools before even the LA schools and the move came to be. So for that perspective, you're absolutely right, Mike. I think it was an eventuality and an inevitability that came to be, and it's been a very good fit in a lot of ways. And Oregon has obviously had a lot of success by the by. I mean, not necessarily every single team, but, the teams that we're talking about and focusing on, no doubt. That said, there are still other aspects of it that it is the first year, and there are things to learn. I can't talk into every single travel aspect about what was good, what was bad, what was hard. If it's not my body necessarily taking every one of those trips in all these sports, but be that as it may, things like, for example, I think the fan base, folks out here need to learn a little bit more when it comes to Big Ten basketball in terms of which games are really big games. It's really easy to sell out Purdue or draw a pretty good crowd for Indiana. It's really easy to sell out Purdue when Purdue travels as well as it does for a regular season game. I think learning that Illinois and Maryland were awfully big games in early January, one of which, Maryland in particular, a win there, was one of the best wins of the season. If you went by the attendance, you wouldn't have known that people felt, it was that kind of an important game. I think there's still a little bit of a learning curve in terms of understanding which games are really, really big games in some of these sports, but that'll come with time as rivalries develop and the like. But having said that, as a fit, like I say, it's certainly been there. And in terms of success, football is obvious. Basketball, both men's and women's basketball make the NCAA tournament. Indoor track is, well, this is track town. They're awfully good at that. They've had some nice success there. And baseball and softball. Baseball is doing okay. They've had a few clunkers in there. And softball is obviously, they were coming in with the expectation to be one of the top teams in the league, and looks like they are. James Crepea, appreciate the insight, man. Thanks so much.
James Crepea, appreciate the insight, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike.
Let's go around the Big Ten, starting off with Ohio State football. They had their spring game this past weekend. One big takeaway was the redshirt freshman Julian Sayin, who was their #1 overall ranked quarterback prospect last year. Looked great at the shoe this weekend. Scored touchdowns on the first 3 drives he had. Now, that doesn't mean the QB Derby is settled at all, but it does help show the breaking news. Ohio State football has talent again. Nobody more talented in all of college hockey than Isaac Howard. The Michigan State Spartan won the Hobie Baker Award over the weekend, basically the Heisman Trophy for the fellows who chase the puck around. Remember, too, he's coming back. Already announced he'll return next year to East Lansing. He spent some time with Dan Kelly after winning it.
Isaac, is it humbling winning the Hobie Baker Award and becoming the first Michigan State Spartan since the great Ryan Miller captured it way back in 2001?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's such a, iconic award, and what comes with that honor is stuff away from the ice. You know what I mean? Just being a good character, a good guy, giving back to your community, stuff like that. So I mean, super humbling and super surreal moment.
Good news for Michigan State. Good news for the Big Ten. You're coming back next season. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the NHL can wait. What was the rationale for you to come back for another year?
Yeah, I mean, I was super excited to have that opportunity to chase another national championship. You know what I mean? I think you look around at our locker room, our guys that we're going to have next year. No one else I'd want to do it with. I think we're poised and ready. And that's the goal. So having another crack at that is really exciting.
To the hardwood, where transfer portal season is happening in men's hoops. Jamarcus Lawrence is heading to Lincoln from Rhode Island, or I guess we should say he's heading back to Lincoln. He spent 2 seasons as a Husker before spending last year up in the Northeast. Last season, he averaged 10 points a contest and started every game. Not surprising, but still important, Illinois will no longer have the services of a star freshman. Kasparas Yakachonis is off to the NBA. He announced he will head to the draft, which had been clear since early on this past season. Could be as high as a top 10 pick. Averaged 15 points a game and was second team All-Big Ten this season. Now, on the other side of the arena in Champaign, some new additions are coming to town. The women have picked up transfers of note. Maddie Weber is leaving Villanova to head to U of I. The guard scored 13 points a game last year and was the team's best 3-point shooter. And Aaliyah Guyton is going to wear orange and blue as well. She transfers in from Iowa, where last season was her first in college. She started 1 game for the Hawkeyes, averaging 4 points a contest. By the way, the WNBA draft is tonight. Last year, at this time, it was the no-brainer of all-time American sports draft no-brainers that Caitlin Clark was going to be the #1 pick. Tonight, Big Ten players to keep an eye on include USC's Kiki Irifin, Maryland's Cheyenne Sellers, Buckeye Taylor Theory, Hawkeye Lucy Olson, and more. One lacrosse game to get to over the weekend. #6 Maryland upended #2 Ohio State. Great defensive effort by Maryland, giving up only 8 goals to a Buckeye squad that normally averages more than 13 a contest. Nice bounce back for the Terps after going down to Rutgers last week. Later today, catch an afternoon softball matchup between Rutgers and Michigan as the Wolverines look for the series sweep. That's coming your way, 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central Time, only on the Big Ten Network. And by the way, Wisconsin spring volleyball on Wednesday can be seen on our air. It is a new thing this year for us, volleyball in the spring, and it is just part of a busy week on the Big Ten Network. We got volleyball, we got lacrosse, we got baseball, we got softball, we got spring football games/practices as well. Make sure you're with us all week long. That'll do it for this edition of our show. I'm Mike Hall. Thanks so much for watching.